The day the couple moved into their new neighborhood felt like the start of a new chapter in their lives. The husband, Mark, had dreamed of finding a peaceful home where he and his wife, Sarah, could finally put down roots. They had spent months searching, balancing budgets, comparing locations, and imagining what their life would look like in different houses. When they finally found the small two-story home with a tidy front yard shaded by old oak trees, it seemed perfect. It wasn't extravagant, but it was theirs. They felt proud as they signed the final papers and clutched the keys to their new life. On moving day, the sky was bright, and the air was filled with the smell of freshly cut grass. Trucks pulled up, boxes were stacked, and the sound of laughter and effort mixed as they carried their belongings inside. Mark smiled, wiping sweat from his forehead as he set down a heavy box. Sarah worked beside him, moving with an energy that came from years of discipline. Though she had recently returned from service, she carried herself with quiet confidence and a calm strength. At first, everything seemed normal. Neighbors peeked out from their windows, some waving politely as the couple moved in. A few even walked over to greet them, offering a quick handshake or a smile. Mark felt relieved. He had worried about how the neighborhood might react to newcomers, but it looked like they would fit in just fine. Sarah, though, noticed one woman standing a little farther back, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. The woman didn't smile, didn't wave, and didn't step forward like the others. She simply stared, her eyes sharp, as if she were already looking for something to criticize. That woman's name, as Mark would soon learn, was Karen. She wasn't just any neighbor, she was one of the heads of the HOA, the Homeowners Association, that governed nearly everything in the neighborhood. From the color of a mailbox to the kind of flowers planted in the front yard, the HOA had rules about it all. At first, Mark didn't think much of it. Rules kept things neat, he told himself. But Sarah sensed something in Karen's gaze that went beyond rules. It wasn't curiosity, it was judgment. The first small moment of tension came when Sarah parked her car in front of the house. She was unloading boxes when Karen approached for the first time. Her voice was sharp but carried a fake sweetness. "You know," she said, pointing at the car, "this street has very clear parking rules. We don't like people taking up too much space. It makes the neighborhood look messy." Sarah, caught off guard, simply nodded. "Of course," she said politely. "I'll make sure I'm not in the way." She smiled, hoping to ease the tension, but Karen didn't return the smile. Instead, she scanned Sarah's face for a moment longer than necessary, as if trying to place her, and then walked away without another word. Mark brushed it off when Sarah told him. "Maybe she's just particular," he said. "Some people in these neighborhoods take things too seriously. Don't let it get to you." Sarah nodded but kept her thoughts to herself. She had dealt with stronger personalities in her life, but she also knew when someone's dislike went deeper than rules. Over the next few days, as they settled into their home, Karen's presence lingered. When Sarah carried groceries into the house, she caught Karen watching from her window. When Mark mowed the lawn, Karen slowed her walk as she passed by, glancing critically at the grass. There was no open hostility, but there was no warmth either. The couple focused on creating their home. They painted the living room, set up furniture, and placed framed photos on the shelves. Sarah unpacked small mementos from her years in service, items that carried memories of faraway places, of teammates, of nights under unfamiliar skies. For her, this house was more than just a roof. It was a sign that she could finally return to normal life, a life with stability and love. One evening, while unpacking the last few boxes, Mark suggested they take a walk through the neighborhood. The air had cooled, and the streetlights glowed softly against the pavement. Families sat on porches, children rode bicycles, and there was a calm suburban charm in the air. As they walked, they passed Karen's house. She was standing on her porch, speaking to another neighbor in hushed tones. Both glanced at Sarah before quickly looking away. Sarah squeezed Mark's hand gently, but she didn't say a word. The following morning, Karen stopped Sarah again, this time with another warning. "The HOA is very strict about trash bins," she said, nodding toward the couple's cans at the curb. "They must be pulled back immediately after collection. I hope you'll follow the rules." Sarah thanked her, though she knew the bins had only been out for a short time. Karen didn't seem satisfied, her eyes flickering with a mixture of suspicion and irritation. By now, Sarah could sense the pattern. Karen wasn't just interested in the rules. She was interested in her. Every interaction carried an undertone, as though Karen were trying to prove something about Sarah's presence in the neighborhood. Sarah tried to brush it aside, keeping her patience. But Mark began to notice, too. "It's like she's waiting for us to make a mistake," he said one night, frustration in his voice. Sarah nodded. "Yes. But I've dealt with worse. She won't break me." Still, despite her calm words, Sarah couldn't ignore the weight of being constantly watched. It was a different kind of pressure than what she had experienced in the military. This was smaller, quieter, but persistent, like a drip of water that never stopped. And unlike her time in uniform, here she couldn't simply follow orders to prove herself. She didn't need to prove anything to Karen, but she knew Karen didn't see it that way. The first week in their new home was supposed to be filled with excitement and fresh beginnings. Instead, there was already an undercurrent of tension. The couple loved their house, but Sarah felt the neighborhood had yet to open its arms. Each time she walked outside, she wondered if she would be stopped again. Each time she parked her car, she half expected Karen to appear. Yet Sarah kept her composure. She had learned long ago that strength was often quiet, and dignity was its own kind of armor. When Karen glared, Sarah smiled. When Karen lectured, Sarah listened patiently. And when Karen whispered to neighbors, Sarah held her head high and walked on. Mark admired his wife for that. "You're stronger than me," he told her one evening as they unpacked the last of their books. "I'd have lost my temper by now." Sarah smiled gently. "It's not about strength," she said. "It's about knowing when someone's words don't deserve your energy. We came here for peace, remember?" But despite her calm front, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was planning something more. The way she watched, the way, she questioned, the way she never smiled, it felt less like casual annoyance and more like a storm waiting to break. Sarah didn't know when or how, but she sensed it was only the beginning. And she was right, because soon, Karen would take things further than Sarah or Mark expected. And when she did, she would come face to face with a truth that not only silenced her but shifted the entire neighborhood's view forever. Mark woke up early the next morning, planning to mow the lawn before the sun grew too hot. The quiet hum of the neighborhood felt comforting as he rolled the mower out of the garage. Birds hopped across the grass, and the air smelled faintly of dew. Sarah stepped outside with a cup of coffee, her hair pulled back casually, enjoying the small moment of calm. For them, it was just another morning of adjusting to their new home. For Karen, however, it was another chance to find fault. As soon as the mower roared to life, Sarah noticed Karen appear at the edge of her yard. She stood with her arms crossed, watching closely. At first, Sarah thought maybe she was just passing by, but Karen didn't move on. She walked over, her lips pressed into a thin smile. "Good morning," she said, though her tone didn't sound like a greeting. "You know the HOA has rules about lawn height. We keep it trimmed exactly at 3 inches here. Too short or too long, and it's a violation." Sarah looked at the grass, then back at Karen. "It looks fine," she replied calmly. "Mark's just keeping it neat." Karen didn't seem satisfied. "I'll be watching," she added as though Sarah hadn't spoken at all. She then walked away slowly, glancing back once more as if to remind Sarah that her presence was being measured and judged. Later that same day, Sarah decided to put a few plants by the porch. She had always loved gardening, and the small flowers she carried in her arms made her smile. As she crouched down to arrange them, she heard a voice behind her. "You might want to check the HOA handbook before planting those." Sarah turned and saw Karen again. "Certain types of flowers are not allowed because they don't match the neighborhood's design. We have a standard to uphold." Sarah paused, keeping her patience. "These are simple marigolds," she said softly. "They're not harmful and they look cheerful." Karen raised an eyebrow. "That's what people say before they clutter their lawns. I'll be noting this." With that, she turned and left, leaving Sarah with a mix of frustration and disbelief. That evening, Mark noticed Sarah's silence at dinner. He set his fork down. "She bothered you again, didn't she?" Sarah gave a small nod. "She came twice today. First about the grass, then about flowers. It's like she's waiting for me outside, ready to pounce." Mark leaned forward. "This is getting out of hand. I'll talk to her." But Sarah shook her head. "No, don't. That's what she wants, to cause a fight. Let's just stay calm. People like her eventually show themselves." Sarah tried to take her own advice, but Karen's persistence only grew. A couple of days later, Sarah parked her car in front of the house to unload groceries. Within minutes, Karen was walking toward her. "You know, residents are supposed to park in their driveways. Street parking is for visitors only, and your car was here last week, too. This isn't acceptable." Sarah, holding a bag of groceries, took a slow breath. "I was unloading things. It wasn't blocking anyone." Karen tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. "Rules are rules. If everyone did what they wanted, this place would fall apart." Mark, who had just stepped out of the house, heard the exchange. "Karen," he said firmly but politely, "we're just settling in. We're following the rules as best as we can. Maybe give us a little grace?" Karen's lips curled into a cold smile. "That's not how this neighborhood works. Everyone must be held to the same standard." Without another word, she turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Mark shaking his head. That night, Sarah lay awake longer than usual. She thought about all the places she had lived during her service: harsh bases, crowded barracks, temporary housing. None of them had felt like home, but she had endured. Now she finally had a place of her own, yet here she was, feeling watched and judged in her own front yard. It felt unfair, and yet she reminded herself this was not a battle to be fought with anger. The days that followed only confirmed what Sarah already knew. Karen's attention was focused entirely on her. Other neighbors went about their lives, some friendly, some indifferent, but Karen seemed to appear only when Sarah was outside. If Sarah watered her plants, Karen strolled by slowly, making remarks about water usage. If Sarah carried packages from the mail, Karen commented on how long they sat at the door. Each moment carried an undertone of suspicion, as though Karen believed Sarah did not belong in the neighborhood. One afternoon, Sarah decided to go for a short jog around the block. She slipped on her running shoes and set off down the street. The rhythm of her steps helped clear her mind. But halfway through her jog, she noticed Karen on the opposite side of the street, walking deliberately in her direction. As they passed, Karen called out, "We don't usually see people jogging here in the evenings. You know, the HOA prefers mornings so it doesn't disturb the quiet hours." Sarah stopped, surprised. "Disturb the quiet hours? I'm just jogging." Karen gave her a tight smile. "Rules are rules," she repeated, then continued walking. When Sarah returned home, Mark listened as she recounted the encounter. He clenched his fists in frustration. "She's twisting everything into a rule. She doesn't want you here, Sarah. That's all it is." Sarah nodded quietly, feeling the truth of his words. Despite the constant friction, Sarah still tried to focus on positive things. She struck up conversations with a couple of kind neighbors down the street. She played with a neighbor's dog one afternoon, laughing as it bounded across the grass. And slowly she realized that not everyone saw her through Karen's lens. but Karen's shadow still loomed, determined and watchful. The breaking point came one Saturday morning. Sarah was outside, cleaning the porch railings when Karen marched up, clipboard in hand. "I've noticed a few things," she announced, her tone sharp. "Your trash bin wasn't pulled in immediately last Tuesday. Your grass looks uneven near the fence, and I saw your car parked on the street again." Sarah set down her cloth, standing tall. "We're doing our best to follow the rules, but it feels like you're looking for reasons to call us out." "Why?" Karen's eyes flickered with something, surprise, perhaps, or irritation at being confronted. "Because rules are what keep this place orderly," she said stiffly. "We don't bend them for anyone." Sarah held her gaze calmly. "I respect rules. I've lived by stricter ones than you can imagine. But there's a difference between enforcing rules and targeting someone." For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then Karen gave a small, dismissive laugh. "You'll learn how things work here," she said before turning and walking away. That night, as Sarah sat beside Mark on the porch, she admitted softly, "I don't think this will stop. She's going to push harder, maybe even call someone," to try to prove her point. Mark wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "And when she does, she'll regret it, because she doesn't know who she's dealing with." Sarah looked out at the quiet street, the porch lights glowing softly, and nodded. Deep down, she knew the storm was coming. Karen wasn't finished, not by a long shot, and soon Sarah's strength would be tested in a way neither of them expected. Saturday afternoon arrived warm and bright, and the street was peaceful in that slow weekend way. Mark and Sarah had decided to bring the last few items from a small storage unit they kept across town. They wanted to finish settling in so they could finally relax without tripping over boxes. Mark parked the small rental trailer by the curb, and Sarah lifted the back door. Inside were a few sealed boxes, a footlocker with a sturdy lock, and a folded folding table they planned to use. In the garage, Sarah moved like someone who trusted her body. She lifted carefully using her legs and set each box on the driveway. Mark followed with a laugh and a joke, and together they worked in a steady rhythm. A couple of younger kids from down the street watched curiously, sipping juice boxes and trading whispered guesses about what might be inside the mysterious footlocker. Sarah smiled and waved to them. She had a soft spot for curious kids. She told them it was full of old memories and boring papers, which made them giggle and wander away. Across the street, curtains shifted. Karen's window held a familiar shape, still, sharp, and focused. Sarah felt it, the way people feel a slight change in the wind. She kept working, but a quiet awareness settled on her shoulders. Mark noticed, too. He gave Sarah a quick nod, a look that said they would finish fast and go inside. They were almost done anyway. They carried the last box up the small path to the porch. Sarah paused to steady the footlocker on the step, then took her key and unlocked the front door. At that exact moment, a shadow fell across the sidewalk. Karen had left her window and walked over with careful steps and a clipboard pressed to her side. Her mouth formed a thin line, as if holding words she was eager to release. "Busy day again," she said in a crisp tone. "I see the trailer is back." She glanced at the street, then the box in Sarah's hands. "I hope you're aware that trailers cannot remain on the street for extended periods, and any items brought into the house must comply with HOA guidelines." Mark kept his voice even. "We're moving the last few things today. The trailer will be gone within the hour." Karen's eyes landed on the footlocker. "What's in there?" Sarah answered calmly. "Personal items. Nothing that concerns the HOA." Karen's gaze narrowed, then drifted to the kids' bikes across the way, then to the porch, then back to the footlocker. For a small second, Sarah saw a deeper emotion move across that face. Uncertainty, maybe, or an eagerness to find a reason, to act. Karen pressed her clipboard tighter. "I've received comments," she said. People are confused about what's going on with constant deliveries, street parking, and irregular activity. Mark blinked. Irregular activity? We're just moving in. Karen said nothing more. She turned sharply and walked back to her house, her shoes tapping against the walkway. Sarah and Mark exchanged a look. Sarah whispered, "Let's finish." They brought the footlocker inside and stacked the last 2 boxes in the hallway. Mark rolled the trailer door down. He started to push the trailer hitch up the driveway to spin it around toward the car. That was when the sound of tires on gravel reached them. A police cruiser slowed at the end of the cul-de-sac, then turned and stopped in front of their home. 2 officers stepped out, a woman with a calm, professional face and a man who scanned the scene with quiet attention. Sarah felt a small knot form in her stomach. She stood beside Mark as the officers approached. The kids who had been giggling a few minutes ago now drifted to their porches, eyes wide. A couple of neighbors came out to water plants they didn't need to water. The street grew strangely attentive, like a stage where everyone knew a scene was about to begin. "Good afternoon," the woman officer said kindly. "We got a call about a possible concern. Is this your residence?" "Yes," Mark said. "We moved in last week." The male officer nodded toward the trailer. "Do you mind telling us what you're doing today?" Sarah answered in a clear, steady voice. "We're bringing the last items from our storage unit. We'll return the trailer as soon as we're done." The woman officer wrote something on her small notepad. "No problem," she said. "This looks like a regular move to me, but we just need to check. Do you have a name and some ID?" Mark reached for his wallet. "I'm Mark. This is my wife, Sarah." At that moment, Karen appeared again, as if summoned by a silent bell. She walked from her driveway to the middle of the sidewalk, then closer, respectful enough to pretend she wasn't interfering, near enough to be part of the exchange. "Officers," she began in a voice that tried to sound helpful, "this neighborhood has had a number of disruptions recently. I'm on the HOA board. I've discussed these issues with several residents who are concerned." The male officer looked at her and nodded politely. "Thank you, ma'am. We'll handle it." Karen's eyes slid toward Sarah, then rested on the front door, then returned to the officers. She had that look again, the one that hoped to be proven right. Mark held out his driver's license. The officers glanced at it and wrote down the address. "And you, ma'am?" the woman officer asked, turning to Sarah. Sarah felt the knot in her stomach loosen just a little. She kept her voice soft. "My ID is inside. I set my purse on the hallway table while carrying boxes. May I step in and get it?" "Please," the officer said. Karen shifted her weight, as if something inside her wanted to stop that step. She didn't speak. She pursed her lips. The neighborhood watched, a quiet audience that didn't know the script. As Sarah turned toward the door, the officer asked a few gentle questions. "When did you close on the house?" "Last week," Mark replied. "Do you have any proof of residence or recent mail?" "Yes," he said. "We have the closing papers and a utility letter." "Great," the officer said. "We appreciate you working with us." Karen took a small step forward. "I believe there were also loud deliveries late in the evening," she added. "And the trailer—" The male officer lifted a hand slightly, not rude, just clear. "We'll ask what we need to ask," he said in a steady tone. The air cooled a little. The sun slipped behind a thin cloud, and the light softened across the roofs. One of the kids' bikes fell over on the sidewalk with a soft clatter. A neighbor across the street, an older man who often wore a cap with tiny pins on it, muttered something to his spouse and folded his arms. He glanced toward Sarah's door with a thoughtful expression. Inside the house, just over the threshold, the scent of cardboard and new paint filled the hallway. Sarah's purse sat on the console table beneath the framed mirror they had hung the night before. She took a slow breath and felt her heartbeat steady to a comfortable rhythm. She had learned long ago how to breathe in moments that asked for calm. Her hand reached for the purse. Outside, Mark kept his stance open and respectful. "We want to be good neighbors," he said. "We were told the HOA is strict, and we're learning as we go." The woman officer nodded. "That's common. With a new move. Some neighborhoods run very tight guidelines. Our call just said suspicious activity. We have to follow up." Mark's jaw tightened for a moment, but his voice stayed fair. "I understand." Karen shifted again. "It's not just me," she announced, though no one had accused her by name. "People on this street care about standards. We can't have confusion or—" The male officer glanced toward the cruiser, and then back at the couple. He kept his tone smooth. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "we appreciate your attention to your neighborhood. We'll take it from here." Silence stretched like a thin thread. A bird hopped across the nearest lawn and pecked at the ground. Somewhere a sprinkler clicked on, sending a soft mist across a bed of roses. The entire street felt like it was holding one quiet breath. Sarah opened her purse. Inside was her wallet, a folded letter, and a small lanyard she used when she needed official identification quickly. She paused, fingers resting on the smooth edge of the plastic. A single memory touched her mind, waiting in line with teammates, trading light jokes to ease long days, the weight of responsibility in her bones, and the simple pride of carrying what she had earned. She thought of Mark outside, standing with patience, choosing kindness over frustration. She thought of the kids who had giggled at the boring papers. She thought of the home she wanted to protect without raising her voice. She took the wallet and the lanyard and turned back toward the door. On the porch, the woman officer made a small note on her pad and looked up. "When she comes back, we'll wrap this up. Thanks for being cooperative," she said to Mark. Her voice held a hint of warmth, as if she already knew there was nothing to fear here. The older neighbor across the street nodded to himself, as though a quiet guess had been confirmed in his mind. Karen, though, stood straighter. Her eyes stayed on the doorway. She seemed to be waiting for proof, any bit of proof, that her complaint had been necessary. Her clipboard lifted slightly, ready to record, ready to justify, ready to turn an ordinary afternoon into a rulebook entry, but her shoulders also showed a tiny tension, a small, almost invisible question about what she was about to see. Sarah's hand touched the door handle. The wood felt smooth and familiar now, like a small piece of comfort. She took another slow breath and stepped onto the porch. Mark looked at her with encouragement in his eyes. The officers waited with patient attention. The neighbors watched from their driveways and porches, some with kind faces, some simply curious. The light shifted again as the thin cloud moved away from the sun. A sofie. Sarah held the card gently between her fingers so the front was clear. The woman officer leaned forward with respectful focus, and the male officer stepped closer to see as well. The card caught the light. It was simple, official, and familiar to anyone who had seen one before. It was her military ID. The officer's posture changed slightly, the kind of change that comes from recognition and respect rather than surprise. The woman officer nodded once, as if a quiet puzzle piece had clicked into place. "Thank you, ma'am," she said, her tone sincere and warm. "We appreciate your service." The male officer gave a small nod, too, and the tension that had hung in the air settled down the way dust settles after a door closes gently. The moment felt different now, steady and grounded. Karen did not move at first. She stood near the walkway with her clipboard in hand, as if it had suddenly become too heavy. Her eyes were on the card, then on Sarah's face, and then on the officer's. The color in her face seemed to drain a little, and her expression shifted from stern certainty to something like confusion. It was the look of someone who had run out of reasons for a storm. Sarah kept her voice soft and even. "We're almost done moving things inside," she said. "We don't want to cause trouble. I put my wallet down just to carry the last box." The woman officer nodded again. Understood. From what we can see, there's no issue here. A move like this can look busy, but it's normal. Thank you for showing your ID. She glanced toward Karen briefly and then back at Sarah. Do you have any questions for us? Anything you need? Mark stepped closer to Sarah, his relief showing in his shoulders. We're okay, he said. We'll return the trailer right away. The male officer looked down the road where the kids had been watching. One of them waved shyly. He waved back. We'll clear the call, he said kindly. Looks like you're doing everything right. Just make sure the trailer goes back after you're done. His voice had no edge, only the plain kindness of a person who had seen many afternoons and learned the value of calm. Across the street, the older neighbor in the cap raised his hand in a small salute toward Sarah. It was not dramatic, not loud. It was a quiet message that said, I see you. Sarah returned the gesture with a small nod. For a moment, she felt more at home than she had in days. Karen drew a breath, finally finding her voice. I wasn't aware, she said, the words careful and soft, as if she were testing them for the first time. I thought there were unusual deliveries in the trailer. The woman officer addressed her gently, with the kind of steady tone that keeps a situation kind. Ma'am, we follow up when someone calls. Today we found a normal move-in with proper identification and no signs of trouble. Thank you for letting us know your concerns. We're all set here. Karen glanced down at her clipboard, then at the front of the house, then back at Sarah. The neighborhood had gone very quiet. People who had pretended to water plants were now pretending to check their phones. The kids had seen enough and drifted, closer to their doors, still peeking around the frames. The air carried a new feeling. Less of a crowd watching drama, more of a community witnessing a lesson. Sarah tucked her ID back into her wallet with careful, calm hands. She did not add any extra words, did not lecture, did not push. She simply stood with her dignity steady. Mark thanked the officers again. We appreciate you coming by, he said. We know you have a lot to do. The male officer smiled. We're glad when a call turns out simple, he replied. Welcome to the neighborhood. The woman officer echoed the welcome. They walked back to their cruiser, speaking softly to each other as they cleared the call on the radio. The car's engine hummed quietly before they drove away. For a few seconds, no one moved. It felt like a pause at the end of a song, when the last note fades and the room is not ready to clap, yet. Karen took a small step forward. Her voice, when it came, had none of the sharpness from before. I didn't know you were... She stopped, searching for words that did not sound empty. I didn't know. Sarah's face was gentle. You didn't ask, she said in the same calm tone. There was no anger in the words, only a truth that sat clean and plain between them. Karen blinked. Her grip on the clipboard slackened, and the pen clipped to the top tilted as if it too had nothing more to measure. I see, she said. She looked around the street as if the houses could tell her what to do next. The moment asked her for something she had not practiced, humility. The older neighbor in the cap walked closer, keeping a respectful distance. He gave a small smile to Sarah. Thank you for your service, he said softly. If you need a hand, I can help carry the last box. Thank you, Sarah replied. We've got just a little left. I appreciate it. The neighbor nodded, then turned to Karen and gave her a look that was not unkind but firm. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Karen shifted her weight back and cleared her throat. I think I will review some of the HOA notes, she said in a voice that tried to be steady. Just to make sure I didn't misread any guidelines. It was a small sentence, but it carried a larger meaning, an acknowledgement that something had been out of line. Mark rolled the trailer hitch into position. The simple, practical movement helped the moment breathe again. Sarah lifted the folded table and handed it to him, and they slid it neatly into the garage. They worked in quiet coordination, the kind of harmony that grows between two people who have carried more than boxes together. Karen took another step back, then another. She looked at the porch, then at the neat line of bushes by the walkway, as if seeing the house with fresh eyes. When she spoke, her voice was softer still. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, and while the words were late, they were honest. "Thank you," Sarah answered, kindness steady in her tone. That was all. No speech, no point made at length, no sharp return, just thank you. It left the door open. Not the wooden one on the hinges, but the other door, the one that leads to better days. The kids down the street started talking again, their voices rising with the friendly noise of weekend plans. A dog barked once and then settled. The sprinkler shut off with a hiss, and the roses dripped quietly in the sun. The neighborhood began to sound like itself again, simple, calm, and ordinary, which was exactly what Sarah had wanted in the first place. After a few minutes, the older neighbor returned to his porch. Karen turned and walked toward her home, not fast, not slow, just thoughtful. She paused by her own steps and looked back once, as if she were considering a new line on a page that had already been written in a different ink. Then she went inside, closing her door gently. Mark slid the trailer lock and wiped his hands. "That was something," he said, not sure whether to laugh or sigh. "You were amazing." Sarah smiled in that quiet way of hers, the one that never asked for praise. "I just showed the truth," she said. Sometimes that's enough. They stood together at the edge of their driveway and looked down the street. The sunlight had a softer color now, the kind that arrives in the late afternoon and lays gold on everything it touches. A breeze moved through the oaks and carried the clean scent of new leaves. It felt like a fresh page, ready for better words. Inside the house, they set the final box on the hallway rug. Sarah put her wallet back on the console table and adjusted the frame over it. The picture was simple. A small photo of the two of them standing on a quiet beach, the kind of place where the sky and the water meet in a line that promises rest. She touched the edge of the frame, then turned to Mark. "Tea?" she asked. "Please," he said with a smile that finally reached all the way to his eyes. As the kettle warmed, Sarah stepped onto the porch again. The older neighbor lifted his cup of something and gave another soft nod. From another yard, a woman with a gardening hat waved. A few houses down, someone set up a small picnic table on the lawn. The street looked less like a place that only measured rules, and more like a place where people lived. Karen did not reappear, but a small, folded paper later slipped under their door. A short note written in careful, slightly shaky handwriting. It said that the HOA meeting times were posted on the board by the community mailbox and that new residents were welcome. At the bottom was a line that read, "Hope to see you there." It was not an apology written in big letters, but it was something, true in a small way. Sarah set the note beside the picture frame and let it be. They took their tea to the porch and sat side by side, listening to the evening gather. The day had started like any other Saturday, and for a while it had felt heavy with misunderstanding. But it had ended with clarity and a kind of gentle respect. The neighborhood had seen who Sarah was, not through loud words, but through a simple card and an honest moment. That was enough. Mark leaned back in his chair. "You know," he said, "people will talk about this for a while." "They will," Sarah agreed. "Maybe next time they'll start with a question instead of a call." He nodded. Maybe. They watched the sky change color, and the first porch lights flicker on, and the day finally let go. Inside the house, the last boxes waited to be opened, holding small pieces of life ready to be placed in steady corners. Outside, the street felt like a place where a new story could grow, one with fewer sharp edges and more open doors. When the kettle clicked again in the quiet kitchen, they didn't rush to refill their cups. They just sat there letting the peace soak in. The house was theirs. The evening was theirs. The next step W. The week after the officers left felt softer, like the air after a heavy rain. The street went back to its usual rhythm, but something beneath the surface had changed. People waved more. Conversations lasted a little longer. Even small acts felt, like bridges, an extra smile, a door held open, a neighborly good morning said with a warmer tone than before. Mark noticed it first. Sarah felt it too, though she carried herself as she always did, steady, kind, and calm. On Monday morning, as Sarah took the trash bin to the curb, the woman with the gardening hat from down the block walked over. She brought a small basket of muffins wrapped in a cloth. "Welcome," she said, with a bright but careful smile. "I thought you might like these. They're not fancy, but they're fresh." Sarah's face lit up. She accepted the basket with both hands and thanked her. They stood talking for a few minutes about the neighborhood, about the oaks, about the good sunrise view at the end of the street, about the community mailbox where everyone shares flyers and lost and found notes. When the woman left, Sarah placed the muffins on the countertop and felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the oven. It was the feeling of a door opening. That afternoon, a light knock sounded on the front door. Sarah opened it to find Karen standing there. She did not have her clipboard. She did not have the firm posture of a person prepared to argue. She stood with her hands folded, a plain envelope in one of them, and she looked like someone trying to start over. "May I speak with you?" Karen asked. Sarah nodded and stepped onto the porch. The breeze moved the marigolds gently. Karen handed her the envelope. "I wrote a note," she said. "I also wanted to say the words out loud, if..." "That's all right." Sarah waited. "I was wrong," Karen said softly. "I let rules turn into walls instead of guides. I thought I was helping the neighborhood, but really I was. Not helping as I should. I am sorry for how I treated you." She swallowed. "I should have asked, I should have listened, and I should have welcomed you." Sarah looked at her for a long, still moment. She accepted the envelope. "Thank you for coming," she said. "It matters that you did." Karen nodded, relief showing in a small exhale. "If you're willing," she added, "I'd like to tell you about the next HOA meeting. We're discussing a few updates. One is a better welcome process for new residents." She took a careful breath. "I would value your thoughts." "I'll be there," Sarah said. At dinner, Mark listened as Sarah shared the moment. He saw how the day had smoothed some edges she had carried. "You handled it with so much grace," he said. "I'm proud of you." Sarah smiled. "We move forward," she replied. "That is enough." The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at the small community room near the park. The room had folding chairs, a whiteboard, and a long table with a pitcher of water and paper cups. People arrived in twos and threes. Some waved at Sarah and Mark. A few stopped to say hello. Even the older neighbor in the cap showed up and chose a seat with a good view of the door. Karen opened the meeting with a steady voice. She thanked everyone for coming. She introduced the short agenda. "First," she said, "we will review lawn care and parking reminders." Her eyes moved briefly, almost shyly, to Sarah and Mark. "Then I'd like to propose a new idea, a welcome guide for new residents and a volunteer welcome team to greet them." A man in the second row raised his hand. "That sounds great," he said. "We had a rough move when we first came. We didn't know where to find the trash pickup schedule for 2 weeks. A few people laughed. Another neighbor added, "And we didn't know the HOA had a list for approved mailbox repairs." We had to ask around for days. Karen nodded. She looked at Sarah. "Would you like to share any thoughts?" Sarah stood, simple and clear. "Thank you," she said. "Moving is stressful. Adjusting is a process. Rules can help. It is also important to make people feel seen as neighbors, not as problems to be corrected. If we combine clear information with a warm welcome, people will naturally follow guidelines because they are part of the community." Heads nodded. Sarah continued. "Maybe the guide can include a map, contact numbers, pickup days, and a short note about the things people love here. The sunrise spot, the park hours, the annual yard sale. Maybe each new household gets a hello. Visit. Not to check on them, but to offer help if they need anything." The older neighbor raised his hand. "I'll volunteer," he said, smiling. The woman with the gardening hat lifted her hand, too. "Me as well. And I'll bring muffins," she added, and the room laughed. A quiet man near the back said, "I can draft the guide. I make brochures at work. We'll keep it simple and easy to read." Someone else offered to set up a small calendar and share it on the community board. Another person suggested a group message list for short updates so people wouldn't be surprised by events or maintenance days. As the ideas grew, the room felt lighter. Karen listened without rushing to control each detail. She wrote on the whiteboard in clean, careful lines. More than once, she looked at Sarah with a grateful expression. When the talk turned to rules, Sarah added a gentle point. "Clear standards keep things neat," she said. "Sometimes, though, life happens. A moving day? A late delivery? A family emergency. In those moments, a little patience goes a long way." "I agree," Karen said. "We'll create a grace period for new residents for the first month, and we'll provide simple reminders before sending any formal notice." The room approved it with a show of hands. It was a small change, but everyone could feel the difference it would make for the next family who arrived with more boxes than energy. After the meeting, people gathered, in small circles. The older neighbor shook Mark's hand and shared a story about his first week on the street years ago when a sudden storm blew his trash bin down the block. "3 people came to help," he said. "That's how I want us to be. Always." The man who volunteered to design the guide asked Sarah for a few lines to include in a welcome note. Sarah promised to write something short and friendly. Karen stood by the door and thanked each person for coming. When Sarah reached her, Karen spoke softly. "Thank you for helping me redirect," she said. "I lost sight of why I started volunteering here in the first place. This helps me remember." "Everyone loses sight sometimes," Sarah replied. "What matters is what we do next." Over the next 2 weeks, the neighborhood grew busier in the good way. A small, welcome team formed. They gathered addresses of new residents and took turns dropping off guide packets and quick hellos. The guide itself came together quickly. It was simple and cheerful. It included a map, key phone numbers, a short list of rules in plain language, and a tiny section called "What We Love About Our Street." That list was the longest. People had sent in lines like "The Oaks in Summer," "The Sunrise Walk," "Mrs. Carter's Roses," "The Kids' Bike Parade on Long Weekends," and "The Way the Evening Breeze Makes the Wind Chimes Sing." One Saturday, the street organized a casual block cleanup and lemonade stand. Kids drew chalk arrows on the sidewalk, pointing to the refreshment station, and the older neighbor set up 2 folding chairs for anyone who needed to rest. Sarah and Mark joined in, trimming a small hedge and sweeping the curb. Karen brought paper cups and extra trash bags. She worked quietly but steadily, and when she looked up at one point, she caught Sarah's eye. They shared a simple smile. The kind that says, "We're doing better." Later that afternoon, the kids ran a small fundraiser with their lemonade stand to buy a new bench for the common area near the mailbox. Neighbors dropped coins and small bills into a jar. By sunset, they had enough. The man who made brochures said he would order the bench and donate a small plaque. He asked Sarah and Mark what the plaque should say. They thought for a moment, then chose a simple line. "Be kind. Ask first. Welcome always. When the bench arrived 2 weeks later, the neighborhood met for a short moment to place it near the mailbox. People clapped when it was set down. It was not a grand event. It did not need to be. It was a small good thing in the exact place where new people would stop and look around and wonder if they belonged. Now they would have a spot to sit, a guide to read, and usually a neighbor walking by with time to say hello. On a quiet evening, Sarah and Mark sat on their porch with 2 cups of tea again. The street was calm. A new family had moved into the house across from the park, and the welcome team had already visited them with a guide and a short chat. The older neighbor had given their little boy a shiny bell for his bike. The woman with the gardening hat had promised a tray of cookies. Karen, who once watched from her window, had walked over that afternoon with a simple greeting and a list of helpful tips, spoken kindly and without a trace of impatience. Mark looked at Sarah with a soft smile. "It's different now." He said, "I can feel it." "So can I," Sarah replied. She thought about her ID tucked safely in the drawer, about the day the officers came, about the pause that followed and the breath that the whole street seemed to hold. She thought about the moment she had shown the card. Yes, but also about everything that had happened after, about people choosing kindness, about a stubborn habit turning into a better practice, about doors opening. "Do you ever wish none of it had happened?" Mark asked. Sarah considered. "I wish the start had been gentler," she said, "but I am grateful for what it taught us, and for what it taught the neighborhood." She looked at the bench near the mailbox, half hidden by the evening trees.